You're listening to Sarah Hagan Backstage, with interviews and insights from years inside the music industry. Join Sarah as she talks with masters of their crafts, finding out what makes them tick, both inside and outside of the music business.
Welcome to Sarah Hagan Backstage. My guest today, Adam Marcello, has been a friend of mine all the way back to the Warped Tour days when he was out with Katy Perry. Adam has had a diverse and interesting career, not only touring with Katy for years, but recording for movies and TV, including the very memorable big band intro to the show Modern Family, becoming a go-to guy for electronics and a key player in the new Roland SPD SX Pro, and continuing to tour and musical direct for incredible musicians such as Michael Patrick Kelly. We are going to talk about all of these things, including the many outfits he wore while touring with Katy. So come along with me as I catch up with Adam Marcello. Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. And tell us where here is at the moment. Where are you?
I am in Dublin, Ireland. I moved here, maybe like 10 years ago. I guess it was right when my wife and I, had our first son, and I was on tour so much, and all her family was over here. We were living in LA with all our party friends, and now we have this little child. So we moved here maybe when he turned about 1.5, and he's 13 now, so 12 years, 10, 11 years. Jeez, long time. She's from here originally. That's the connect the dots. She grew up in Dublin, so okay. That's why it makes sense.
Very nice, very nice. So how is it there? How do you like it?
I mean, it's great. We really like it. It's a great sort of home base. You know, again, being on the road so much, it's nice to just come back, and it's a great place to just kind of hang out. And it's good school systems, and they've got all their little friends here, and it's a great place. I really enjoy it. And I grew up in Rhode Island, in America, where the oldest buildings. That's some of the oldest buildings in America. That was sort of the first colonized place. But that dates back to, 1400s. And,
sure.
Some of the structures not even around. So it's funny. It's nice being here where just around the corner, there's an old church with a cross from the 1100s. It's just there, just a stone cross, but it's built on an old stone that was like a basin stone. Not exactly, I'm messing up the whole thing, but that stone is like 3,000 years old, and it was used in ancient sort of ceremonies. So the culture, and that's just right down the street. You walk up and there's kids playing on it.
Yeah.
I love that sort of element of being here too, the sort of ancient culture. I mean, there is ancient culture in America as well. The Native Americans and
sure,
grew up learning all about that as well. But sort of, there was nothing really. They didn't leave any structures behind.
Right.
So
exactly.
There's no evidence of it really. We would find little arrowheads and stuff in the dirt in my yard, but other than that, they didn't leave big buildings behind. So.
Sure. Yeah, it is a weird thing. I think the first time you experience something like that old, it's similar to you. So I grew up in Boston, so New England, and it is like the oldest part of, the modern America, buildings and all of that. And you think when you're growing up, you think, oh my gosh, these buildings are so old and there's so much history. And then you travel somewhere else and you see something that, oh my goodness, it's, so much older. And it's like a whole new perspective, I think.
Absolutely. And it's great. It's great having that here. And it's a great music scene too. I mean, Ireland traditionally has been an amazing place for music.
Absolutely. And let's jump into the whole music thing. So what have you been up to most recently?
Most recently, I do a lot of, I went through that phase of, touring so much nonstop, and it was great. And I loved every second of it. And as fun as it was also really hard. And then the kids come along and it gets even more difficult. So I segued into more musical direction and programming and show building. So I've been doing a lot of that recently with a lot of acts over here. Dermot Kennedy is one of them. I've been working with a bunch, putting their show together. Tom Walker, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a UK artist. Amazing. So I've been working with them a lot. A lot of that sort of thing. I've also been on the road with, there's an artist called Michael Patrick Kelly, and it's actually fantastic. He's mega huge in Germany.
Yes.
And we play these sold out arenas nonstop. He could just keep playing the same places over and over and over. So we just, and I put his show together, and I actually played drums on that as well. It's really fun. And we're going back out this Friday again for another 3 weeks in Germany, Austria. I think we might be going to Poland this time, or the Netherlands. So it's really fun.
That's great. Yeah. So you're getting like you're getting like the road experience, but like in smaller bursts, right? And
exactly. It's not like I'm going to Asia and Australia for 2 months, and even if I have 4 days off, I can't really come home. Like this is great. If there's a day off on a 2-hour flight, I can just hop on a plane and come home. You know.
Yeah.
So that's great to have that sort of option over here. I mean, Europe and Germany in general is a huge music market. I think it's the second biggest in the world, maybe after America. I could be wrong, but it's huge. Every time I go there, I'm just so surprised. You know, we'll play a show, and then we'll have to do a bus ride, and it's like 16 hours on a bus. It's really, really big place. I just forget because I think of, coming from America, which is massive. You think about Europe, and everything seems smaller. The countries are smaller, but they're pretty, like Germany mainland is big.
Definitely.
So a lot of places to play.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think the interesting thing, or one of the interesting things about Germany too, is like the diversity in music styles from one place to the next, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's kind of like, I mean, in the US too, we have a lot of diverse styles from one place to the next. And as things are, there's more access to music, it's become less kind of like sectioned off, but you still do travel to different places in this country, in the US, and think like, oh, there's a whole something scene going on here that's different, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's what I like, that it still happens even in this like sort of YouTube world that we live in, where everything is just accessible at any moment from every device in our pocket and our TVs and all that. I still like that there's the individuality still in cities, the difference between like Boston and Seattle is still a real thing, LA and New York is still a real thing. And there's different sort of music vibes that happen in all those different places. I think that's really cool that we've retained that somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's fun to like travel to different countries and listen to what, not only what local music they have going on, but then also I'm always fascinated by what music from what time period in America is playing in different countries. Right? Like for some reason,
are they just that far behind that they're only playing 90s music, or
right? Or are they just really into Elvis? Like what?
Yeah, exactly.
It's one of those things. It's so interesting. But so that's cool. So you're getting like the road life in shorter bursts, and then you're home, and and I know that like, having kids and having a family makes you kind of reconsider that constant road life that is really kind of taxing.
It's hard.
How did you feel like, did the pandemic change any perspective for you with being home so much?
It did, because like right before lockdown, I was on tour with Katy Perry for years, and those were the tours that were just sort of, because I played with her from the start of her career, and it was like when it started and then it didn't stop. And she just kind of snowballed and snowballed and snowballed and turned into this amazing musical thing that she is. And it was amazing to be along on that ride, but it was pretty much nonstop. We would tour and tour and tour, and then we'd have, even when we would take time off, we'd have to do a million shows and a million, promo things. And it was great. And at the time it was perfect. But then it overlapped with, starting the family. And so it got really hectic. And so I didn't do a tour 2 tours ago. I don't even remember what it was. And I played on, she was the judge on American Idol that year. So I played in the house band because I wanted to sort of stay in one place and not do the big tour and be able to come back and forth. And that was great. And then, so I did that for a season and then went out and did a bunch more shows with her. Basically right up until lockdown. I think we were in Australia the day before, 2 days before Ireland shut it down. So we flew back and we played our show. It wasn't like, I remember being on the plane and thinking, I remember, SARS and the bird flu.
Yes.
I was the ultimate sort of naysayer. My wife was like, you have to get home. This is really bad. And I was like, And then we got home and everything shut down. And I was like, you were right.
Oh my gosh.
So, and then, we did a bunch of the sort of like video performances and they were really fun, but it did sort of change my perspective thinking, our whole industry just it was amazing that it was on such a razor's edge and we didn't even realize it,
Yes.
And everybody's talked about this. We've all had these conversations, but the fact that it only took this one, and a lot of people got really sick, and it was very, very horrible. I don't mean to say it only took this because it was a really devastating thing that happened, but the fact that it was something so basic that and people like us were just out of a thing that we did for our entire lives, not knowing if it would ever come back, that fear and sort of just confusion of like, am I ever going to be in front of a crowd of people again doing this,
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
But, at the same time, it was great to have a big old reset and sit at home and try to teach my kid, homeschool, whatever he was in, I guess, whatever level math I was trying to teach him. He learned long division at that point. I wasn't doing any of the new math. I need to see your work. We're doing long division. That's it.
Yes. Yeah. And that was really challenging. I mean, for all of the musicians that I've spoken with, and, before I started this podcast, just the phone conversations that we would have about, will we ever get back? Will we ever see each other again? Like that was really hard because we're in an industry where we rely on human interaction. We rely on, being together. Right. Exactly. Absolutely. And so I think that was probably the hardest thing to wrap our brains around, which was like, will it ever come back? And if it does, will it ever be nearly the same or close, or, what are we facing, right? What is this going to look like? But it
still hasn't really, it's back and we're playing shows and everybody's in, but there's still this sort of haze that's hanging over everything, where, there's this weird sort of, could it just happen again? Or, everything seems like, this last tour that I was doing, we were doing COVID tests, every day you'd have to do a test. And I think the first day of production rehearsal, the guitar player tested positive. And then the monitor guy tested positive. And it was like, they have to leave now. And so I had been recording, I record everything, every rehearsal, everything. So I built a whole set that night back in my hotel, just built a whole set of COVID tracks for everybody that still lives in the session. Just COVID tracks that I can just unmute a live performance. And I feel like a crowd, fortunately they all came back. They were done.
Yeah.
And they were healthy enough to come back before the tour actually started. But I feel like a crowd would be sort of accepting of that in this day and age, where it's like, I hear someone I hear a guitar part that's happening.
I don't see
but
one.
I don't
Yeah.
see.
Yes.
I feel like people can understand, you know, what we're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with now. So, but that sort of changed my perspective a lot on, you know, what a live show has to be now too, and what kind of, especially in the big pop shows, more redundancy for people now, like
Absolutely.
having subs, because back in the Katy days, there were no subs. You know,
Sure.
and the way that I built my rig with all the sort of automation and triggers and sounds and samples, I had painted myself into the biggest corner in the world, because even if I broke my leg, I would have to do the show. There's no one that could just step in with the choreography of it all, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
was, and so I would start filming everything from overhead, and I would do recordings of the live show just in case I had to call up a buddy and be like, "Can you play the show tonight?
Right.
Because I got into a car accident or whatever. So here's the video. Here's what my hands are doing."
That's a little
But yeah,
scary.
like, so back in those days, though, you were sick, you went on stage. You know,
You did.
there was no like calling in a sub because someone can't come on stage. It was just have a bucket on the side of the stage, and if you puke,
I
you
know.
puke. That was
How many times have we heard those stories, or
Oh,
you know, experienced it? Maybe you experienced it, but like, you know, you go out and you're sick and you just play it. Or you know, I had so many experiences where I would be on the road for work, and you know, you'd be not feeling great, and you'd be at a trade show, and I think about it now, and I'm just like, man, you know, we all would go home sick from NAMM or whatever. Like, you would go home
exactly
with like this terrible sickness. I went home with pneumonia once, and you go home with the flu, and you know, it just was like that, because you're all there, and it didn't matter. Like, you didn't stay home, or you didn't stay.
You just did it. Like, there was no sub. You don't call in a sub, you know. That was it. And frankly, I would never want a sub. I want to play. I could be totally sick or have a broken leg or break or hurt something. I want to play the show. I want to do it. Like, I don't want to call in a sub. Now we're forced to have to do something. If we do get something like COVID, we cannot show up. So it's a different, that's a different sort of vibe.
For sure. Yeah. And let's talk about, like, when you talk about all the things that you did or you do now, and I know it evolves over time with new technology, but you're not sitting behind an acoustic kit keeping the beat. You're doing so much. And when I think about someone using electronics and, you know, being an integral part of the production, I think about you. Can you talk about like what you did with Katy and what you do now with Michael Patrick Kelly, and how that all works? Because it's fascinating to me.
It's you know, Katy would have been sort of the genesis of that whole concept for me, at least. You know, people have been playing with triggers and samples and stuff, loops for years and years and years. My introduction to it would have been on the Katy gig. I mean, I'd done stuff before where I had an SPS, the original gray guy, and I would run loops from it, and we would even run like little backing tracks on, you know, at the Hotel Cafe in LA, you know. But when I got on the gig with Katy, and there was this sort of void because she was so new, and you could see the trajectory in front of her. You know, it wasn't. We were playing Warped Tour, and
I was there at that Warped Tour.
No way! Oh yeah, wait a minute. Yeah,
remember? Yes,
I do.
I have to just say, like, it was so long ago, but I do remember seeing Katy and just being like totally like, okay, this woman is, you know, her career is going to take off. It's taking off, right?
And that was right at her first record had like just come out, and I think her first single had just happened, and we were on the second stage. It wasn't even we weren't even headlining. So and it was just, you know, 4 guys and Katy. And I had made some backing tracks, and I was running it from my original, the iPod with the wheel, like not a touch, with the wheel on it. And I soldered my own cable, splitter cable, ran tracks right, click left, back to my ears. So
Wow.
it was total mono. But we only did that on maybe like 3 songs, and the rest was just flat out rock songs, because that was kind of her first record. But those few songs that were the big pop smashes, you could see where it was headed. And so I sat with my laptop on the tour bus and figured out, people recommended Ableton Live. That was, and that's still the program that I use now. They, recommended it as the easiest one to run backing tracks and sort of the most versatile. So I just would sit in the lounge and dig into it. And I built sort of a show, cobbled together something that I thought was like a live show. And I brought it to management. I was like, this is the potential of what can happen. And just sort of slipped into this musical director role. I wasn't intending to, but it was this void that needed to be filled. And I just kind of stepped in and said, this can happen. She can do this instead of this, and it'll sound this much better. And it would grow from there. And so back to your original question, the step ahead of that, or the step from that, would be with my personal sounds, because I think when your artist is saying, I want it to sound like the record. I want it to sound like the record. I want it to be live, but I want it to sound like the record. It's our job to sort of marry that up and present this and make it sound correctly. And you could have the best sounding drums in the world, but it's not going to sound like a Lindrum, or it's not going to sound like an 808.
Right.
It's just, that's the nature of a lot of these pop songs. So I started experimenting with using sounds within Ableton and sort of automating them in a live context to make it. I didn't want to have it in a sense of some of these sounds change. The snare drum will change 5 times before we reach the chorus in some of these songs.
Right.
I'm not going to have 5 different snare drums tuned all crazy. I don't want to have 5 pads triggering 5 different sounds. So I worked out a way to automate those sounds within a program, so that I could have one pad that's always going to be my snare drum. So I know it's going to change, and it's going to automate and do all the stuff I want it to do. And to me, as a drummer, it made more sense. Guitar players are changing guitars every 5 seconds. I'm not going to do that with my snare drum. I'm not going to swap off my cymbals every time. This was the perfect workaround for that. And it was really fun to dig into. And not to get too nerdy with it, but it's just basically assigning samples to an envelope, a MIDI envelope. So with MIDI, okay, we're gonna get semi-nerdy. MIDI, you've got 0 to 127, right? That's your MIDI range. And when you say something like a mod wheel on a keyboard, when you roll that wheel, it's basically sweeping through the range. So I was thinking, why can't I just use that same range? And with a program like Ableton, you can basically automate a whole performance so you can have, within one song, you can have 127 different sounds if you want. And so figuring that out, and sort of, huge light bulb went off, and I was like, this is the greatest thing in the world. And I didn't invent it. I'm sure other people will watch this and be like, dude, we've been doing that since the 80s or something. MIDI's been a protocol since the 80s. So, but to me, it was like this huge light bulb went off. And then I was able to look at it in a really musical way, rather than, like a tech sort of way, if that makes any sense. Because I'm a drummer, and drumming is just as much visual as it is, I know what a snare drum, I see it in front of me, and I know what sound it's going to make. When I go, I knew already, because I can see them. When you see a blank pad, that could be a hand clap, it could be a snare, it could be a bell, it could be anything. So having assigned pads for certain things made all the sense in the world to me. So I know whenever I hit that, it's going to be some kind of snare drum. This is going to be a hand clap, and I don't have to have 50 pads out there. That was sort of the genesis of all that kind of thing. And I still do basically the same stuff today on gigs, and I'll program shows for other people, and it's
Mhm.
basically the same concept. Ableton it has grown, and it's so much easier to do now, and it makes
Mhm.
way more sense, and it's better, and it's stronger, and it's way more stable. But it's the same concept, really.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask too. Do you have people coming to you for advice with that or for help with that? Because I feel like
Totally,
that's,
yeah.
oh my gosh, it's so like, it's something that people really need to know how to do. Drummers need to know how to
Yeah,
use those tools.
absolutely. And it's, yeah, like I always say, it's not the add-on thing that you bring anymore. It's become the sort of the necessary thing. Every
Hmm.
pop gig needs this kind of sound, because it is the difference between making it sound like the record and making it sound like a bar band that could be the best musicians in the world. But if the sounds aren't right, it's the same thing with a guitar player. If it doesn't sound like the right part, or the keyboards, if you're kind of getting close to the sound, it's not quite there, it doesn't sound right. So as close as you can get it to those sounds, but also incorporating acoustic drums and acoustic instruments, giving it that sort of live feeling.
Hmm.
That's the perfect
That's the
combination for me.
challenge, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, and it's not even just pop music. A friend of mine just the other day on a country gig called me up asking these questions, and he's like,
Yeah.
"What gear should I get? I have this one, and can I get the new pad came out, so of course I'm pushing the new SPD SX Pro, which is
Hmm.
fantastic." And I helped a lot, and I mean everybody helped in the design, because all of these things we've been begging for years. But I was a big part of the R&D for it, and I'm so happy with it. It's over here. That's why I keep looking over there.
Oh, that's great though. I did
But
see that
yeah,
came out, and I saw that you were, talking about it too,
yeah,
promoting it. Great.
yeah. It's a great instrument. But so yeah, it's across the board. It's in all styles of music, and it's great. And it's another way that as drummers we can be, expand our musical repertoire, our realm, our scope of what we do as drummers.
For sure. And it's funny that you mentioned the country music thing too, because so many of my friends who are drummers in the country genre have been the musical director on the gig, and the same thing, like needing to program things, needing to trigger things. And
Yeah,
there's always like a few go-to people who know all about this. I think about you
yeah,
in that way. Matty Payne out of Nashville, he's one of
yeah,
those
yeah,
guys. And
totally.
yeah, so it's just that's fantastic. And you've actually done some teaching too, right? At the college
Yeah, yeah,
level, if I'm correct.
absolutely. Yeah, there's a college out here called BIM, uh, and they're all over the UK, and there's one in Dublin. And I'll go in and I'll do sort of. There were a couple of years where I was doing like a regular masterclass series where I'd go in, because it is, these kinds of things. There is like a certain level of technology you have to, like a base level of technology you have to understand going in.
Yes.
Anybody can do this, and if you sit with a computer or a pad or whatever, you'll be able to figure it out.
Hmm.
But there is a level that you sort of need. So I would do this sort of, series of master classes where I would start at the very beginning and say, this is what it takes to get to this level, and then we can start doing all this stuff. But yeah, it's been really cool, and they're great over here, and I'm like thrilled and excited that people are excited about it. That
Yes.
these young kids are coming out and like, I want to do this. I saw you played a song and you hit something, and it was making a different sound every time you hit it. How'd you do that?
Yes.
So yeah, let's get
Yeah.
into it.
It's right. It's so interesting. And then it kind of comes full circle in a way that, like, so you're like creating electronic sounds to play in an acoustic setting. And I find so many times, like working at a musical instrument manufacturer, a lot of the things that we would get asked about is, well, there's this hand clap on the recording. I need to recreate that, but I want to do it acoustically. So like,
Yeah,
it's interesting how it's like the opposite too happens, where you have an electronic sound, and then you want to figure out how to make it acoustically, which I always love too. Like that's always a challenge too. Yeah.
Well, see, that was the thing before all this, that was always my go-to. And I remember making records and going on sessions and working so hard to get these sort of drum machine-y sounds with acoustic drums. But it was like a badge of honor, you know?
Yes.
I would be like, I'm going to get that, you know, specific snare sound with an acoustic drum, and it's going to sound awesome. And they're going to think it's a drum machine. You know, I used to love doing that. And, you know, back in, this would have been, I used to do it on the Katy gig too. Not that I, you know, I'm not a big stacking guy with the stacks and things, but I used to do a China with something, I don't remember what I put in it, to get a hand clap sound. That was the thing. I wanted to get like a digital hand clap. So I took a small, the Oriental China.
China trash,
China trash, that's it.
Yeah.
I took a 16 and I put like some splash in. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
Pretty tight. And I would use it as a hand clap, but that would have been back in like 08 or something.
Yes, right?
It wasn't like a huge thing that everyone was doing. And I saw someone do it and I was like, yeah, that's kind of cool. But I remember doing that a ton. And then I was like, this is stupid. I'm just going to use hand claps. Like,
right, let me use the sound, right. The trash former.
The trash former. Those are the ones.
Yeah. Trash former, that was always good.
I do love the trash former. Yeah. I love all the nasty, gross, dirty symbols. My favorite is still the Crash of Doom. Like,
oh yeah, for sure.
My favorite. Yes. That was my favorite, you know, years and years ago. And it's still, there's just something about it. Whatever that frequency is, that sort of mid-range sort of like wash, and it's in all the sort of in the pop tunes. They always have these big risers. Somewhere in the middle of that riser is right where the Crash of Doom lands, and I just love it. I just love that sound sonically. That sonically where the Crash of Doom sits, and sonically where the like a vibraphone sits. Those are like my two favorite frequencies. What's your favorite frequency? Those are my two favorite sort of frequencies right there. Like Crash of Doom, vibraphone.
That is so interesting. The Crash of Doom, and not to get too symbol geeky here, but that symbol was so varied so much from one to the next. You know, some of them would be super flat, right? And then some of them would be super, you know, wonky is what we would call them. So I would get the call all the time, like, can you pick me a Crash of Doom and make it like as wobbly as possible? Or, you know, I want one straight so I can ride on it, like that kind of thing. But that frequency, that kind of like dissonant, like, I don't know what it is, but I'm fascinated by that too.
I love it. It's my favorite sound. It's been my main Crash for like, I don't even know, like 15 years.
It's amazing. Yeah. And Dennis Chambers. Dennis is the one who
it was the Chambers, that's right.
Dennis Chambers, yeah. So funny. Amazing. Yeah. But okay, so I want to kind of like go back in time before we run out of time today. I want to hear about like, so you now are doing all of these things with acoustics, electronics, and musical directing and all of that. But how did everything start for you? Did you like always want to play drums? Were you did you take lessons? How did everything begin?
I mean, I did. In my mind, I always wanted to play drums. You know, I came from my family. My dad was a musical theater teacher in general, but every summer he'd put on these big music productions, and so that always fascinated me. And my mom and her sisters were fantastic singers, and my grandmother as well. But that was from the era of, you know, you don't follow that as a woman. And my mom always wanted to be a drummer, but she kind of wasn't allowed to. That was just the generation that she came from, you know? Yeah. It's like, what are you crazy? You're not going to be a drummer.
Sure.
So when I think I saw, and I always tell the story, you know, I saw a rerun of Buddy Rich on The Muppet Show, The Battle with Animal.
Yes.
And I was like, that's what I want to do. And my mom was like, okay. So they were really supportive from the start. And, absolutely. And so I just kind of did it, and they didn't like force me to do it. You know, I went into band in junior high, and I always played drums, but I played saxophone in junior high. And then when I got into high school, they would always call me up from junior high to like march in the drum line. And so I was like this little kid with like 5 drums and a giant plumed hat. And it's like Memorial Day, and you're drenched in sweat. And I'm just trying to carry this stuff. And so I would always be doing that when I played saxophone. And then when I finally got to high school, it was like marching band, jazz band, concert band. So I did everything on drums. And then I was like, high school was coming to a close. And I was like, I just want to play drums. Like, how do I do this? So I went to Berkeley, and it was amazing.
Yes,
it was a great school. It was great because of this sort of immersion of being with all these musicians from all over the world, and all these teachers who were just like, I couldn't believe their abilities,
Yes.
And so I got really fortunate, and I was able to go there and met a bunch of people. And then right out of Berkeley, I was like, well, I could either, do New York, Nashville, or LA. So I just packed up my station wagon with drums and packed the clothes inside the drums. And put the drums in the station wagon. And I just drove to LA.
That's amazing.
I had buddies out there, and we just kind of like started playing, and it was I never really wanted to be like, I never wanted to like be in a band. I was in bands, of course, but I wasn't like, we're in a band and we're gonna make it. I was in a million bands, but that was never my sort of goal. Just like it was never my goal to like, it was never my goal to be a pop side guy. It wasn't. I wanted to be the session guy. I wanted to be the guy with records and TV shows. And so when I moved to LA, I was lucky enough to start like right away. I got on some movies and like commercials. One commercial was for Ford or something, and it played for 10 years, and it was great. And every once in a while on the radio, I'd hear it. I'm like, I remember I did that session 8 years ago. It was like the craziest thing in the world. But I got to play on some amazing TV shows. Do you know Arrested Development?
Yes.
I played on the main title of that, and then some like stuff for the first season. And
amazing. I didn't know about that. I knew about Modern Family. It was the Modern Family, right?
That's the big one. Yeah, because and a good buddy of mine wrote the title for that, and he called me in, and he was like, it's like a big band thing. And so in my mind, I was doing the Gene Krupa,
yeah.
And I didn't get it until I saw it the first time, because it's a great main title and it fits so well with the show.
Good. It's so good. Yeah.
But I didn't get it until I saw it, because it's like they're doing their thing and we're talking and it's funny, and then there's the joke, and then it goes gun 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 gun. So it's the bucket of fish, When I saw it the first time, I was like, no way, it makes total sense now.
Yeah, it's perfect. And it's like so drum heavy. I love that.
Yeah, it's just the butt of the joke. Anyway, so I got really fortunate, and I was able to do all that stuff. And then, but I was also playing with everybody in town. There was an amazing scene of singer-songwriters and musicians, and everyone would play with everybody, and it was the greatest. And Katy was part of that scene. It was like, Sarah Bareilles was in there, and they were all up and coming, and everybody would play with everybody. And Katy was one of those people, and something happened. I would always play with her, random sit in and play percussion or play drums, whatever it was. And then she needed to put a band together for like a New Year's show or something. Now I call my buddies, I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And that's right before everything started to sort of take off. And, right. So and then when that happened, it was very intense, and it just took up all my time, that's when my career sort of segued from, I'm making records and I'm making commercials and doing these things, and I'm now a guy on the road, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just because I was gone. That's kind of how it
Absolutely.
happens, you know.
Yeah, and like, was Warped Tour, that was kind of like the first
That
tour?
was her first like real tour. We did like
Right.
some things. I think we did South by Southwest that same year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I remember getting the call, and management was like, "Yeah, do you want to go on Warped Tour for 9 weeks?" And I was like, "Nope,"
Yeah.
because then, and then I called him back, and we were like, "Oh, you know what? That'll be cool. It's fine. I get it." But to me, Warped Tour was like you're on like a minivan, and no
Mm-hmm.
one's showering, and you're waking up at
Yeah.
6 a.m. to like drag gear to the stage. This was different. I mean, there was she was like just starting, and I think she got MySpace to sponsor the tour.
Wow.
MySpace, remember them?
That's like way back. Yeah.
And so they had like a giant bus, and it was wrapped with like a MySpace logo, but it was also like a giant Katy Perry from the record.
Mm-hmm.
So everywhere we went, it was like people would just follow the bus. We're like, this is the worst idea you could have ever had. Because we're pulling out a gas station, and all these cars would pull in, and be like, well, I guess no one's getting off the bus. But it was great, and it was really fun to do it because Warped Tour at the time, it was like a bunch of metal bands. I think like
like punk and
yeah, it was like hardcore and metal and punk, and like Gym Class Heroes were on it, and Dillinger Escape Plan, and and there's like we're like second stage, and Bring Me the Horizon is playing, and then we're playing. So like the fans, they'd be like Katie's fans and their fans, and then they would stop, and we would start playing, and it'd be like this weird, but somehow it worked, and everybody was like into everything. So it kind of worked out, and it made for a really cool vibe, and we had a great time doing it. So I'm really happy that I got to do it, because after that, it went kind of straight into like just full tour mode.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a wild ride, like over the years, getting to play like, everything basically.
Yeah, I ticked all the boxes, all those things that you're like, I want to play on Leno and Letterman and Saturday Night Live, and I want to do all those things, and I got to do them, and it was like some of the greatest times, just to be like Saturday Night Live in particular would have been the one that we saw all the bands on, like as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was like, I'm never gonna like that's saved for like the elite drummers. And then I'm up there. I mean, she has me dressed in like a lion suit or something, something stupid. But like, I don't care. I'm gonna do it. Like, you dress me as whatever you want. I'm happy.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
So you dressed in a lion suit. Were there any other memorable ones?
Oh yeah, totally. I was just thinking about this because my kids are super into Three Amigos, the movie now.
Oh right.
The 7-year-old, or he's 8 now. The 8-year-old, he's always every night he's like, "Can we watch Three Amigos again?" I'm like, "Okay."
That's so funny. What a great.
And he sings along with all the songs. It's great.
Yeah.
But I pulled up a picture of me, because this was her thing. Like whenever we would go, before she had dancers and the full show, we would do all these, TV appearances. And she wanted to, like, we're in Mexico, so I'm going to dress you up as this. And we're in Japan, so you're going to be in like whatever, sort of martial arts uniform. It was a little bit weird, but at the same time, it all kind of worked. But there was one where we were, I swear, we looked like the Three Amigos. It was amazing with the big hat and everything. That I had to put it down my back because I kept hitting it I couldn't play because I kept whacking the front brim of the hat. It was like the upstroke. So yeah, there was that one. There was some sort of karate uniform at one point. We dressed as pirates. That's a pretty good one.
I love it.
Like full on, but not like we're talking like Pirates of Penzance pirates. So like full eyeliner and like flowing. It's pretty good. I was into that. I think there was one, she flew in for like a Nickelodeon show. She wanted to fly in as Joan of Arc, I think. She
Oh
flew
my
in and
gosh.
killed somebody, and so we were dressed in like sort of Elizabethan denim. They made like these Elizabethan costumes with the big collars, but they were made out of like denim jackets and stuff.
I
It's
love
really
it.
weird. It was cool, but it was a little strange. That one in particular, it was for Nickelodeon. I remember me and the bass player walked out, we're taking our positions, and there's like these 10-year-olds in the front row, and they were like, what do you think you're doing? Because they're dressed, and I was like, dude, this is the biz, man. Their face was just like, what?
Oh my gosh.
It's pretty hilarious.
So good.
It's the
But like,
biz,
and it's all fun too.
Absolutely.
It's all,
I love
all
it.
part
I'll
of
do
it.
anything. I'll do all that stuff.
Talking to Charles Haynes, he has some really great stories about playing with Lady Gaga, and like
I can't imagine.
Thinking it's so funny. It's just so funny to hear him talk about it, because he's just like, then we get there and this is what you're wearing tonight, and he was like, and I'd always shake my head like, what?
That was it. And there were some band members that were like, nope, not doing it. That's it. I'm out. And then they'd be up on stage with like a giant flower headpiece. Like, nah.
You're like,
So
you're getting up there. You're gonna do it.
There's no getting out of this. You're here.
Yeah.
You're gonna have it.
Amazing. That's amazing.
But it was all fun. I mean, there's a million dumb costumes that were amazing.
Yeah.
And it looks great. I get it. When I watch some of those performances back, I'm like, yeah, that looks amazing. The only one that didn't, actually, I take it back. I think it was either Leno or Ellen. It was a Christmas. We were on at Christmas time. Mm-hmm. So she dressed us up as elves with the big elf ears. That was not cool. That was the one that didn't work, because it was like we had to put our in-ears in, and then I had to put these and they were kind of like half falling off. It was that was a bad one.
That was the step too far. That's
I think
that's where you have to draw the line.
Yeah.
And all the kids are watching, and the elf ears are falling off.
Yeah, didn't translate.
No. Oh my gosh, that's so great though. So now, bringing us up to like present day, you're out there, you're touring, you're teaching and helping other people kind of get to where they need to be with their electronics. So where should we look for you? Where should we keep an eye out for where you're going to be next?
I mean, I don't know. Kind of anywhere. I mean, I'm the worst. I have the worst social media situation. I'm from the old sort of guard of.
I understand.
You're out there and you're playing, and to me, like, social media always felt like who wants to watch a video of me playing drums? This is like, I'm bored recording this video of me doing this. So
right.
So I'm trying to get better at like putting forth the stuff. But yeah, I did a couple for the new SPD SX Pro. I mean, I did a whole series of videos for Roland, but I made 2 of the patches that are in there, 2 kits.
Very cool.
And I'm really pumped. That to me was another thing that it's like, you always get, like, I remember I got my first keyboard. It was like a Casio MT52. Mm-hmm. And it had all these built-in little sequences. And I was like, somebody played that. Somebody went in there and did that. Who is it? Who played this? Oh, it always fascinated me. And now I got to be that weird person that you play a loop and you're like, who wrote this loop?
I love that.
I'm super pumped on it. And, they're really fun to play. And there's a couple of things on my Instagram where I made some videos down in one of my favorite bars here in Ireland, down in the west, in the countryside, basically. Mm-hmm. It's like one of our favorite places to go and play, and we love everybody, the owners. It's the most amazing spot. And I went down there and just filmed, just a couple playthroughs of it. And they're up on there now. You check them out. It's really fun. It's just like, that to me is like this old place that's been there forever. In this, you walk down and there's like a stone circle.
Oh, wow.
And here I am, with the most current electronic setup playing this thing, and to me, I love that sort of like mixture of the worlds, and it was really fun.
Yeah, like what a cool juxtaposition. That's amazing. I'll link to your Instagram account and I'll
Yeah,
link to
absolutely.
some videos too.
And I'll
So
try to put more stuff up. I'm going to be on tour, coming up next week for a few weeks. But that's only in Germany. So if you're in Germany, come to the shows. It'll be fun. It'll be great. And
absolutely.
then
I'll put the tour dates up there too so people can check
absolutely,
that out.
yeah, totally. And then
Very cool.
but just lots of stuff all throughout the year. It's a big surprise.
Yeah. You're always doing something. I'm fascinated to keep up with where you're at and what's going on. It's always great, and super super happy for you to be back out on the road too after all the.
Yeah, it's fun. I love it. Back to the old pandemic. I know, like, it's whatever, but it made me like sort of rethink drumming too, and I was able to sit at home and like practice and open up some of those books that I had years and years ago and go through it and be like, why am I doing this? Like, what is it what's my drive now? It went from this thing that I loved to like a career and a job. And now I'm at home so like, what is it that I love about this now? Like, what's my goal with this? So it was a nice way to sort of reset it and be like, I want to learn the stuff that I either used to do and I can't really do anymore, or the stuff that I was always like afraid to learn, or
yes.
So I'm super into that now. I love just like learning as much as I can.
That's amazing. I've heard that from so many people too, that like, that so many of us kind of got on this train that was moving real fast in one direction, right? And then when we were forced to look at what we were doing and why, and maybe what we intend to do in the future, it made us make like more purposeful choices, I think. And when you talk about the reset, that's how I think about that too. It made me think about how I'm spending my time and what I'm doing and what I really want to be doing, maybe what I don't want to be doing,
Yeah, exactly. True. It's true.
That was a good part of it. But yeah, I'm glad we're all back, and I really look forward to seeing you in person again soon, because
I know
it's all about soon enough, somewhere or another.
somewhere in the world.
Absolutely. But thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This has been really fun.
Absolutely. And again, anyone who's listening, follow Adam on social media, on Instagram. I'll link in the YouTube description and the podcast show notes, and check him out. I
promise I'll put stuff up. I promise. I'll start putting more stuff up.
We love it.
You can be bored with me watching me play drums.
No, we love it. We want to watch you. All right. You take care, Adam.
See you later.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in today. Join us each Tuesday for new episodes of Sarah Hagan Backstage.